If everyone's ready, the chair calls Senator Tom Coburn from the Convention of States. The senator is a former United States Senator from Oklahoma. He served for 10 years in the Senate and was a congressman for 6 years prior to that. He's also a medical doctor by profession and has recently joined the Convention of States project as a senior advisor. Senator Coburn, would you join us at the podium, please? And Senator, just for the record, would you state your name and who you represent?
My name is Tom Coburn. I represent the Convention of States and myself as a citizen of this country. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be before you. I'd also thank you for your service. I served 16 years in both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. I know the downsides of this job, your job. I know what comes with it, and it's not what everybody normally sees. There's a lot of negatives that we don't talk about, and you pay a price for it. So let me thank you each individually for paying that price. Nobody ever thought I'd ever end up in politics. If you went to my high school class reunion, they'd say you're the last guy we ever thought would ever get in this mess. And there was a reason for that. I'm absolutely plain spoken. I have no finesse. I admit that to you today. But I also have a story to tell you that I think is important that you listen to. I spent 16 years in Washington, and the whole period of time there was to have a fidelity to the U.S. Constitution, what it said, what it intended. I've read the Federalist Papers 10 times. I know what our founders intended. And I also, through both my degree and as an accountant and as a physician, learned that you don't solve problems by treating the symptoms. You treat the disease, the dis-ease. And our country is diseased. We have a lot of problems. But the biggest problems in front of us are the fact that we're going down the road that every other republic has gone down. So go to history. Tell me a republic that's survived longer than us. Tell me how they achieved their survival. And tell me what the common denominator was that they all failed under. And I would put to you today that we're failing under the exact same common denominator that every other republic has failed. The other thing I know through my experience as a 67-year-old male, being raised in the 50s in this country, is my freedom today is far less than what it was in 1960. Far less. My personal individual freedom. Now, nobody intended to take part of that away. It has happened. And it's happened because the size and scope of the federal government has expanded way beyond anything our founders ever intended for the federal government to be. They intended for you to be the purveyors of justice and the protectors of liberty in your own state. And let me just give you a few examples. We have people who want to propose a balanced budget amendment. I'm all for that. But the fact is Washington's totally dishonest with you when they talk numbers about where we really are. And I'll give you an example. The CBO, as well as the Office of Management Budget, said that our deficit was $420 billion last year. Well, that's an out-and-out untruth. Because if you look at the increase in unfunded liabilities on the books of the federal government, what actually happened is we accumulated about $6 trillion more in excess than what we had. $6 trillion, 1 year. And that's made up of almost $1 trillion in federal employees, retirement and health benefits that's not been accounted for. That you go to the Social Security trustees report, the Medicare, Medicaid trustees report, and you look at all the rest of it, you come up with about $5.6 trillion per year in additional obligations that's going to fall on our children. So I go back to what has been the fall of every other republic. It's been fiscal. It's been fiscal in nature. They all collapsed financially. And there's all sorts of pressures that we get as Oklahomans or Texans and legislators. You get all these benefits of the money that flows from the federal government, but every time it comes with strings. And I use the example several times. I actually had the Department of Transportation actually calculate this in Oklahoma, is if you had the same amount of money without federal rules on building safe highways in Oklahoma, how many miles can you build versus building highways with federal rules? Well, we can build 1.66 miles of highways using common sense and Oklahoma ingenuity that are just as safe, just as good, will last just as long for every mile we can build using $1 of federal transportation funds. Think about your education fund. Most states, it's not in Texas because you guys are so big and so successful, but most states, education funding is 50% of the budget. How much of that do you control? About 25%. Because all the rest of it's controlled by somebody in Washington with a set of rules that doesn't care about your children, has no knowledge of what your children, has no knowledge of the local or regional implications of what needs to happen in education in Texas. I'd also put forward to you that one of the guys that wrote about our founding, one of the guys that was very involved, also founded the University of Virginia. His name was Thomas Jefferson. And it really was difficult for him to do that. It was hard at that time to get a university founded. And he was asked, why don't you go to Congress and get some help? You know, he was well liked. He was president. He could have gotten it. And he said, my young man, you don't understand. For the federal government to be involved in education, you would have to change the U.S. Constitution by an amendment. Well, that's a direct quote from one of our founders. Where do we find ourselves today? The other observation I would give you, for having been 16 years in Washington, is the further away you get from the people, the less common sense there is. And, you know, there isn't a thimbleful in Washington. It isn't there. There's a lot of conflicts of interest. There's a lot of expediency. There's a lot of cowardice. But there's not much courage, and there's not much common sense. And I would just relate to you this following story and then answer any questions you have. Over the 10 years I was in the Senate, I identified in excess of $400 billion of duplication, fraud, or waste. Nobody disputes that number in Washington. It's all still being spent. And I served there under Republican presidents with Republicans under control, under Democrat presidents with Republicans under control, under Democrat presidents with Democrats under control, and under Democrat presidents with Republicans under control. So I've been there in all mix. They're not going to fix it. They lack the courage, the willpower. They don't love our country enough compared to how much they love their job. And what we're seeing is a diminution of your rights to represent your people in the state of Texas and their right to liberty, which we gave to the federal government to form the federal government. They didn't give us, the states. The states gave the federal government its being. And it's time to rebalance that effort. This will be a hard thing to do. Some may not want to do it. But a prediction for you is if we don't do it, we will go exactly the way of every other republic in the history of man. Edward R. Murrow said, history never recognizes difficulty as an excuse for failure. I think our country can cheat history. This wonderful diversity of people that we have, this wonderful mix of ideas, this wonderful genius that comes when you mix all these ideas together with the American effort, we can have another 100 or 200 years of a growing, vibrant, entrepreneurial republic that elevates people and lives no matter where they come from. But only if it's liberty-based and only if the sovereignty of the states is restored to the level at which it should be. Thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Members, any questions? I can see it on your face.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Chair recognizes Representative Miles.
Lay off that high fastball.
Yeah, it was a high fastball. You got it. Senator Coburn, let me thank you for your testimony. It was enlightening. And like you, many of my peers probably would have thought I'd be in politics. I just had a couple of questions that I need to ask, just for point of clarification. How long have you been involved with the Convention of State Projects?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. How long have you felt the feelings that you expressed today here?
4 years.
How long have you had those?
4 years.
Since the Obama administration?
No. I'm a good
years.
friend of the president's. This doesn't have anything to do with the president. I started thinking this way before President Obama's there. This isn't a problem of a Democrat president or a Republican president.
You give me that fastball
Okay.
again. How long have you felt this way for the last 4 years?
At least 4 years.
Last 4 years.
When I kept running up to, I can't solve a problem in Washington.
Right. And you've been involved for 6 months with this organization?
No, 6 weeks.
Six weeks.
Yeah.
6 weeks. Okay. And the last time there was a convention, I think this was probably for the other gentleman that spoke before you that had to catch at 2 o'clock. The last time there was a convention was in, if I'm reading correctly, was in 1787?
89, I think.
1780.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not the historical expert on this.
My staff has done some research. And
Okay.
we look at it as 1787.
Okay.
They called a convention. Texas actually called a convention, Mr. Chairman. You probably already know this. 1899.
He was there.
You was there?
Doc would have been closer.
I didn't say that.
Doc Anderson was there, or at least his hat was.
In 1899, and the last one for the country was in 1787. And you really feel that if we continue on the roads that we're going, there will be a Republican that will go down in history as another failure.
Yeah, and let me tell you why.
Please.
We're right now, if you use generally accepted accounting standards, the unfunded liabilities for the federal government, just not state, for the federal government's $144 trillion. All right, I can back that up.
I don't doubt that.
And there's $18 trillion worth of debt. Now that comes to $162 trillion. That's $500,000 per man, woman, and child in this country. So we now have everybody's future leveraged $500,000 just based on what we owe and our obligations over the next 50 years. And we don't have the capability, given where we're going in terms of our growth, to outgrow that. So how do you solve that? Well, you solve it the way we're solving it now, and every other country in the world's doing it. They're printing money, we're in a currency war, and they're deficit spending. Everybody's doing it. There's not anybody that's not doing it. So what's the outcome of that? And so for us to end up on top, for everybody, means we need to be honest about what our problems are. That we can solve these problems. I'm not saying they're not solvable. But you can't solve them unless you're honest about what they are. OMB isn't honest about them. CBO isn't honest about them. The Speaker of the House isn't honest about them. The Leader of the Senate, and I'm talking about Republicans, aren't honest about it. The President isn't honest about them. Nobody in Washington's honest about what the real problem is. And the real problem is we've mortgaged our kids' future and undermined the stability of our republic by spending money that we didn't have on things we didn't need. And I'm not talking about social programs. We need those. I'm talking about the $400 billion, $100 billion in fraud in Medicare a year, just in one program. And we've known it for 5 years and nothing's happened. Well, I think if you let the states take care of that, Texas legislature would fix that in a year. You wouldn't tolerate it. So why would we allow us to continue down that road? Our children are worth more than that. Our future's worth more than that. Let's cheat history. Let's do what's right. The way our founders gave us a way to fix it. And I don't want to lose our rights. I don't want to give away anything. But I know, as much as I got gray hair today, what's going to happen to us. And I'm a student of history. And I don't see a solution other than us as members of individual citizens in individual states reasserting what is our right under the Constitution to put some control on the federal government.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Clarity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator, thank you for being here today and for your testimony. I very much enjoyed both the knowledge and the history and the experience that you have and bring to bear on these issues. I would like to ask a few questions, though. I hear what you're saying. You don't need to treat the symptom, you treat the disease. That makes perfect sense to me. And I think you've done a good job describing it. And I guess I'm curious with Mr. Our previous witness, Mr. Ferris. I think he identified three fundamental issues or topics he would like to see taken.
Areas of germaneness, I think, is the way he put it.
That's fair enough. One was fiscal restraint on the federal government. I think the second was reducing the jurisdiction of the federal government. And the third was to establish term limits on federal officials. I think I got that correct. First off, do you agree with those being the three areas that need to be addressed if there's a convention of the states? Is that the right? Are those the right topics or areas of germane?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to say that. I'm comfortable with that because if you're talking about fiscal issues, you're talking about how much can a regulatory body out of Washington tell Texas to spend on water when in fact there's no health benefit to citizens of Texas? I mean, should there not be a connection between those two? So I think with the areas of germaneness, you can go in a lot of places that will help our country become healthier and more economically sound.
Well, and I guess that's my question. I know that one of the concerns that opponents of a convention of the states have is the quote, runaway convention. Okay. Those three areas, I would agree with those. And we do fundamentally agree on this. I think our federal government is on an unsustainable trajectory. We cannot keep doing what we're doing. In fact, I would submit to you that I feel my role as a state representative and state legislator in Texas is to make Texas as strong as it can possibly be for what inevitably may happen with our federal government.
Yeah.
I think Texans are always better equipped to take care of Texas. Yeah. And so with that in mind, so I share the same concern, and I don't, what's the classic definition of insanity?
Continue doing the same thing, expect a different
results. Well, we keep doing the same things, and we see some of the problems with the results. But those three areas of germaneness, or those topics, are very broad, and purposefully so. And I think that's one of the reasons it gives us concern about opening this up to everything, because in many respects, those three areas of germaneness do cover everything.
Well, they really don't.
There are some, as we know, as Chairman King can tell us, there are some artful dodgers involved in the legislative process who are very good at arguing germaneness or materiality or whatever the case may be. And you can drive a 18-wheel truck through any one of these areas and make something germane.
I used to have your exact position.
Okay.
I did, up until probably a year and a half ago.
And tell me when the scales fell off your eyes.
The scales fell off is because we're doing nothing assures us of failure. And I would risk, I don't think there's any chance, zero chance of a runaway convention. First of all, because I trust the common sense of about 15 states in this country that is totally different than what you see in the far northwest and the far northeast. So there's 15 states that are never going to let anything stupid happen in this country. That's number one. I trust that. That's a belief. There's no facts behind it. It's just my trust. The other thing is right now 69 of 99 legislatures are controlled, legislative bodies are controlled by more fiscally conservative people that would not want to give up those guaranteed rights under the Bill of Rights or other recommendations. So I don't see that as a real thing. Here's my main point, is the fear of something going wrong versus the knowledge of it, we're going down the tubes. I don't think they equate. And our country was built on courage, not fear. It wasn't built on worry. It was built on I can do. It was built on let's get together, let's meet in the middle, let's solve the problems, let's secure our future, let's secure our children and our families. That's what made our country. And what we have to do is get back and reach for that.
And Senator, I do appreciate all that.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me interrupt just for a second. Folks, we are really excited everybody's here today, but we kind of have a tradition of not applauding the witnesses when they're testifying and no hooting and hollering and things like that. So kind of just grit your teeth and restrain yourself.
And I think we have that rule because we're kind of jealous because they never applaud for us. It's always for the witness.
Every time.
But
we worry about the heckling, too.
Mr. Chairman, they can wave their hands quietly. We'll know that you're applauding.
There you go.
That's what you can do. We'll know that you're applauding.
But Senator, let me ask you a question and put your doctor hat on.
Okay.
And when you took the Hippocratic Oath, you were the instruction is first do no harm. And I agree that we have significant challenges to our country, our nation at the present time. But I would submit to you that this republic has withstood more strenuous tests more difficult challenges to its not just its fiscal health, but to its various existence, from the time of the founding of the republic, through the war between the states, through the First and Second World Wars. We have faced many challenges as we move through the potential problems as we have tried to embrace civil rights, and those changes we have met and those challenges very well in this country. So these are serious topics. We want to do it, but I'm also one of those few lawmakers that I don't think we judge our success by how many laws we pass.
Oh, I agree.
I think we do our better job when we eliminate laws that we no longer need.
Yeah, I always told my constituents, you're safe when we're not in Washington. We can't hurt you.
That's right. I have many of my constituents who say we're here 2 years every 140 days. They prefer we're here 2 days every 140 years.
Let me give you an example. Just I think it will kind of show you where I am. I have stage 4 prostate cancer. Okay, that's a tough disease. I get to make a choice. I can take some terrible poisons every 21 days that have a very small but real chance of killing me, in hopes that I can cure that disease, or I can not take it at all and know I'm going to die. I think that's where we are. That's my assessment. I wrote a book called Breach of Trust. Now, I've written a couple of books about Washington, but the breach of trust really is about the character of our country and the character of our politicians and the character of our leaders. And the real deal is whether or not we're going to get heat for doing what is in the best long-term interest for the country, even though it might not be popular right now. And I decided when I went to the Senate, nobody wanted me in the Senate. All the Republicans were against me when I ran. Nobody wanted me there. And the fact is I was known as Dr. No, because I actually looked at the Constitution and said, it isn't there. I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to let it move. And so I got a lot of heat for that. But the fact is I have the highest reelection percentage of anybody ever in the history of Oklahoma. Not because I was right all the time, but because I was truthful and straightforward for how I saw the problems. And so you get elected to see the problems. I can't change your mind on what that may or may not be, but what I can call each of you to do is to have the courage to look into the future to see what the risk is of not doing anything. And I would tell you, in my judgment, it is severe. And we're not a long time away. I'm a great studier of economics. I have spent the last 5 years reading everything I can about economics. I think the world's going to melt down economically in a very short period of time based on what's going on out there right now. And I don't think there's anybody smart enough to stop it. And I think we ought to be ready for that in both our freedom, our budgets, and our country.
Well, thank you, Senator. Let me just finish up this last question. I would just make this observation, and I do sincerely appreciate your testimony and the passion which you've represented your state and our nation and the service you've provided. But as you to carry the analogy that this is like a terminal illness, I think it's prudent on the part of this committee and of all citizens and of all states in our federal government to go seek a second and a third opinion.
Sure.
I want to make sure I have that right diagnosis before I take a potentially fatal medicine. And I'm not saying we don't need to do that. I will tell you, I think I can speak for myself, but I think the other members of this committee, that we are very open-minded in trying to understand these issues. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to solve it here this afternoon. But we are sincere and earnest in looking at these issues, and I want to hear from many people. I think that, Mr. Chairman, you said there's 3 schools of thought. I think we've now heard from 1. So we're going to get at least 2 more opinions.
You are.
But you make a very persuasive case.
I just make one point.
Testimony.
If you don't use the right numbers, doesn't matter whether you pass a balanced budget amendment or not. And Washington has never been honest about its numbers. So if you pass a balanced budget amendment without generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP numbers, you got nothing. And what you really have is disappointing the American public because you ask them to sacrifice to solve a solution that won't give you a solution to the problem.
And Senator, thank you for that. I will tell you, my sitting in front of me on my desk on the floor is Representative Stevenson, who's a CPA, so he's going to be in my ear about this all the time.
Good.
So I appreciate your testimony. Thank you for being here.
Representative Stevenson.
I'm not going to talk. I am. And I've spent a lifetime myself, not just being a CPA, but what's the effect that's happening on the country, especially in the tax law. It's amazing. I mean, can't imagine how anybody. I asked Senator Cornyn one time, I was up in Washington, D.C., if I could he would give me a pass to the White House. And I said, I'd rather go to the Treasury. And he looked at me kind of funny. And he said, I said, more preferably, I want to go to where they write those regulations. I just want to meet those people. That's what we have a problem. We can't even understand what the stuff comes down. I appreciate you putting out stuff. It's something that I really strongly believe in financial and general accepted accounting principles, because it works. Numbers don't lie. The liars make numbers. And that's our problem in the country. That's why Texas, I'm going to brag on this because we are the best by far.
You are.
We don't do that to the extent of anybody. Thank you.
Representative Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Coburn, let me also say thank you for the time that you served. And now that I start thinking, I remember a very flattering piece that CNN did on you a little while ago. And I remember watching that piece and wondering and admiring your words then. But I got to ask you some questions because I'm the double minority on this particular subcommittee. So I've got to ask you a couple of things.
Okay.
Just so I can get a right perspective of where we're going and what we're trying to do. Would you agree with me that the deficit is going down? We're working toward getting the deficit down as we speak right now?
No, I would not.
Okay. Is gas prices affordable at this present time?
Are they affordable?
Yeah.
Depends on what your budget is. Yeah,
And the
it's
Dow
better.
Jones is breaking records every week.
Yeah, they did in 1929. They did in 2001. Exactly the same thing.
And we're going to have a robust discussion about it, I assure you. And the deficit is shrinking. More people have affordable health insurance at this time.
Yes.
Unemployment is the lowest since before the recession. And the nation is not doing just that bad, are we? Are we really doing that bad?
Yeah, you are. And let me tell you how you measure it.
Okay. Tell me how. Now, when we
Here's
talk
how-
about measuring things, we have different degrees of measuring.
Okay, but let's just see if you would agree with this.
Okay.
Median family income, you think that means anything in this country?
Absolutely.
Okay. We're at the level of 1988 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we are now 25 years. We have median family income hadn't increased in terms of real dollars. In other words, the standard of living is exactly the same as it was in 1988. Why is that? And that's not Democrat or Republican.
I'm with you on that.
That is, we have tampered down. We lost 300,000 businesses last year. The unemployment rate isn't true because the participation rate isn't accurate. Half of the kids that graduated from college last year aren't working in a field in which they graduated. And of those half that aren't, half of them only have a part-time job, and they're living at home with their parents, not because they want to. So have we done better than other people? Yes. Has the Obama administration done some things to make things better? Yes. You know, I'm a good friend of him. I defend him all the time.
I remember that in that story.
And I'm not liked in Republican circles because
I remember that in the
he's my
story
friend.
that you and him were very, very good friends. He relied on you when it came to economics.
Yeah.
So I remember that part.
So, but the point is you're seeing signals. Go back and study 1929. Go back and study 1987. Go back and study 1999, and you will see the same thing. We have an exorbitantly high PE ratio on forward earnings. The other thing is the bid cover on our bonds. Here's the thing you really need to worry about. It's been shrinking every month that they're issuing new bonds. All right? That's the number of bids versus enough bids to cover the auction. What happens the first month when the bid cover ratio is less than 1? It doesn't matter what the Federal Reserve does then. That's what the world's saying our interest rate's going to be. The Federal Reserve isn't going to control it anymore. So the time for us to be acting is before the rest of the world controls us like we've been controlling the rest of the world. We are the dominant currency. And had we not had a rising currency, we'd be seeing greater growth than what we have right now. But there are some things that are going on in terms of the Middle East and the price of oil that's been manipulated that have long-term benefits to the Middle East and long-term deficits to us.
So one more last question, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. So you think that state governments, with the exception of the great state of Texas, for which we're in, you think other states the other 49 states can do as good as a job as, or better than the federal government?
Oh, by far, by far. Yeah, I really do. And here's why. They're not smarter. They're closer to you.
Yeah.
You know,
But we always say politics is local. We always say that.
well,
That's the term we
it's
always
not
use.
even politics that's local.
so
it's about hearing what
the
people think. I got to 20,000 letters a month. I read every one of them as a U.S. Senator. I was the only senator to do that. I wanted to know what they had to say. That's what kept me close and connected. That's hard to do. It's even hard for you to do in a state as big as Texas to read every constituent letter. The fact is, the closer we know this by history. Our founders even said, the closer the government is to you, the more effective it's going to be and the more liberty you're going to have. And so it's not, I have Coburn's rule of bureaucracy. And I observed this while I was in Congress. Here's my observation about federal bureaucracies. It applies to states too, but not near to the degree. Never do what is best when you can do what is safe for the bureaucracy. And I've seen that 100% in action, and you have too in the state of Texas. When some common sense decision could have been made, it wasn't because we're afraid we might embarrass or we might expose the bureaucracy.
That's correct. And let me say this. We live in the great state of Texas, but nobody's perfect.
I agree.
Unfortunately, not even Texans. We're not even perfect. But we work hard at perfecting and correcting the wrongs.
You're one of the greatest states in our country.
That's what makes us different from other states. We work hard at perfecting our wrongs.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Members, any questions? Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you for being here, and we're honored to have you, and just appreciate your service to the country, and you're in our prayers and your personal struggle, and so thank you very much for sharing that and being very open and candid with us. I found it to be very compelling that you were where many of us have struggled on this issue. And you talked about a year and a half ago the fact that you weren't supportive of this movement, so to speak. And I think we've ideological alignment on all the things that we discussed today, be the fact of runaway government spending, all the issues, the great concern. I've had some economic training in my life as well about the dollar losing its position as the reserve currency of the world. I think is very concerning to us. But you're obviously taking one path, directly going towards the Article 5 convention. I guess my question is, do you see any other path that the Congress can take, obviously driven by the hopes and the actions of the American people, to resolve this short of this? I want to get your perspective on, if you wouldn't mind.
It's a bold, blunt perspective, and it's not very well appreciated in Washington. But my solution is fire everybody that's up there and send somebody who's had real life experience across the board and reelect everybody new that's in Washington, no matter what the party is. But not another career politician goes to Washington because the personal conflict of getting reelected versus doing what's in the best long-term interest, it is always there. And the only people it's not there is the ones that don't even give a flip about being there and don't care whether they're called senator or not. And so that's a rarity in Washington. So the American people could do it. They just haven't. And because we have a system where incumbency is so advantaged in this country to where you can hardly defeat an incumbent. And they may be great or they may be lousy. So the real deal is, can you fix this a different way? Yeah, change everybody that's in Washington, that's in elected office, and with the mandate, go clean this government up. Get rid of the $420 billion worth of waste, fraud, and duplication. Get rid of the $100 billion worth of fraud in Medicare. Change how the agencies work. Why is it that the average federal employee retires at a minimum of $75,000 with paid health insurance, not on Medicare the rest of their life, with the benefits higher than anybody else in this country, even some corporate position? And why are we spending $1 trillion a year to try to afford that? And why is it that we have more federal policemen than we have U.S. Marines, when in fact there's not supposed to be the first federal policeman? I mean, those are some questions we need to be asking, and we're not asking them. So I think that there are other ways to do it. I just don't think they're going to happen. And I, quite frankly, I left there discouraged because I beat my head against the wall for 10 years and got really, other than eliminating earmarks, nothing done.
And in your 16 years, roughly, of service to the American Congress, up until a year and a half ago, you were opposed to this concept.
Well, I hadn't really considered it. I've been working. I said, surely I can convince my colleagues. Surely when they see this fraud, surely when they see that there's $65 million a year spent in the Pentagon that doesn't have anything to do with defending the country, surely common sense will say they'll change their mind.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Lobbyists have more power than common sense. And careerism has more power than common sense. So I think the way we restore the balance between the states and the federal government, and we put the federal government back in the position it was intended to be, which all our founders wrote about to get the thing approved in the first place, is to have a convention of the states that will actually do it.
Senator, again, thank you for being
Thank
here.
you.
Whatever decision we ultimately take here in Texas, we're honored to have you here, and we appreciate you very much.
Appreciate it.
And again, our prayers and thoughts are with you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much.